I was 13 when this happened to me. I stayed at my friend's house almost every weekend. She had a huge bedroom and I just lived with my mom in a small apartment, so whenever I stayed there it felt like I had a taste of what a real family home felt like. That would be true if it wasn't for the constant arguing that I'd hear from her parents. Her dad was always really nice to me, pretty much treating me like his own daughter. He'd buy us food and DVDs and make sure that we had the best sleepovers every week. Her mom, on the other hand, was always quite cold with me. She wouldn't really even speak to me. Most of the arguments that I could hear were her shouting at him. Looking back, I realized that she was emotionally manipulating him, claiming he didn't love her and accusing him of being sleazy. But at the time, I just thought this was what parents would do every night. Anyway, we would mostly just turn up the TV and distract ourselves from the shouting, and usually we'd have a really good night. This night was different. Her dad basically rushed us up to her room and we could tell he was stressed. I tried asking my friend about her parents, but she just deflected and said she didn't want to talk about it. We did our makeup and hair and tried on different outfits throughout the night, and within a few hours we were almost falling asleep whilst watching the first Twilight film. Suddenly we could hear her parents arguing really loudly. There were bangs and the sounds of things smashing. This wasn't normal. I could hear her mom practically screaming at her dad, throwing the usual accusations and seemingly hitting him. I know this because he was shouting stop. At some point he started to make his way upstairs and I hear him slam the door to their bedroom just next to the room we were staying in. It wasn't long until her mom made her way upstairs and burst into their room. I heard him shouting, "What the hell?" And then lots of screaming and shouting. The whole house was practically shaking as they were throwing each other around their room and knocking into the wall. I felt really uncomfortable at this point and asked if we could lock the door. My friend agreed and reminded me to be quiet. Just as I clicked the lock, the screams and shouting went silent. My friend and I stared at each other, waiting until we heard one of them go downstairs or to make any kind of noise. Nothing. We waited for minutes, listening at the door and speculating what was happening. Had they just gone to sleep after all that shouting? Unlikely. Suddenly, I hear footsteps and rush back to bed. There's a gentle knock on the door. "Honey, are you awake?" Her mom was coming to check on us. She literally never did this. Before my friend could respond, her mom tried to open the door. She realized it was locked and then immediately started shouting loudly, "Open the door! Now!" I looked at my friend with begging eyes and told her not to open it. Her mom started pleading with us through the door, kicking it loudly, sending massive shocks throughout the room. Her mom turned her attention to me and started ordering me to open the door, gradually getting more nasty, telling me I was a leech and that I would end up like my mother, alone and miserable. I started crying and so did my friend. At this point I called my mom and told her what was happening. She could hear the door being kicked and the nasty comments, and she told us to put something in front of the door. She told me she had to hang up for a moment whilst she called the police, and we were both left there waiting for this terrifying moment to be over. The banging stopped and I could hear her mom's footsteps going down the hallway. The footsteps came back towards us and then things got seriously disturbing. The end of a knife burst through the door. It was shiny and long, and she repeatedly stabbed the door, gradually chipping away at the cheap wood. We were obviously screaming uncontrollably at this point, and I have a vivid memory of exactly when I noticed something terrible. As the knife came through the door, I noticed that the white paint around the hole started to turn red. It looked like the door was bleeding. My first thought was that she'd hurt herself whilst on her rampage, but my friend's screams suddenly made me realize exactly what had happened. She started screaming for her dad. It hadn't even crossed my mind. She'd only walked a few steps to go and collect this knife. Why would she have a knife in her bedroom, and why would it be covered in blood? Up until this point I thought we were just going to be in trouble with her psychotic mom. Maybe she would take away our snacks and make us go to bed, or send me home. I was pretty naive, but it just didn't cross my mind that she was going to kill us. The door was slowly coming apart and she was just grunting loudly every time she'd stab the door. She was evidently getting tired, but she wasn't giving up. My friend was still screaming for her dad and I was a complete mess, crying and pleading for her mom to stop. She started trying to reach her hand through one of the cracks she'd made, but she couldn't reach the lock. At this point, when she'd reached for the lock through the smashed door, she was ripping her skin along her forearm, desperately trying to get in. Her arm was flailing around through the hole. We both cuddled up in the corner of the room, exhausted from all the crying. She was going to get through and there was nothing us small girls could do to stop her. We both hear something that makes us stop sobbing, and we look directly into each other's eyes. Police sirens. The cops were here and we were going to be saved. Her mom clearly heard them as well, because she started going feral on this door. She was screaming and smashing at it with both hands, occasionally stabbing wildly at the hole she made. We'd thrown a small bedside table and a chair next to the door, which lined up perfectly with her wardrobe, creating a line of furniture that perfectly blocked the door from opening, even if it was unlocked. The cops started banging on the front door and she made the choice to violently shove her arm through the hole, ripping open her arm. I watched as she pushed through the pane, finally reaching the door lock. She'd done it. She was nearly inside. She opened the door a few inches before our barricade stopped her from pushing it any further. Her hand once again reached through and started clawing at the bedside table we put there. She was gradually moving it and it was clear she was making progress. She pushed through enough that her shoulder was now in the room and her arm was slowly shifting the table to the side. All while this is happening, the police are smashing the front door, reacting to our terrified screams. All at once, we hear the door downstairs give way, the cops shouting for us, their footsteps running up the stairs. Her mom must have used all her energy to force the door open and lunged straight towards us. We were crouched in the corner, unable to quickly react. She landed on my friend and gripped her neck with ferocity. I remember how fast she turned purple. She was still holding my hand and struggling wildly, trying to get free whilst her own mother was choking the life out of her. The cops burst into the room, immediately tackling her to the ground. There was so much screaming and shouting and flashlights, and I think they even used a taser. It was overwhelming. My friend lay next to me, barely breathing and having a seizure. They ran to her aid and one female cop kept checking me and asking me if I was okay, scanning me for injuries and trying to get a response from me. I think I just froze at this point because I don't remember much of what happened after. I know we went to hospital for a while and I remember them putting a shiny blanket on me, which made no sense to me at the time. Throughout the night we learned that her dad had been stabbed to death. I think he had over 80 stab wounds, all over his body. Her mom was sent to a psych ward and remains there today, over 10 years later. I never saw my friend again after that night. She was sent away to live with her grandparents. It completely messed me up for years. I was a dark and troubled teenager. Even now I have terrible anxiety around staying at other people's houses. I used to dream about having both parents living at home together, but I realize now that my home life was much better than what my friend had. If you're enjoying the video, please show your support. Even though this happened 12 years ago, I still remember it very vividly. When I was 14, I was visiting a friend I hadn't seen in a few years, and we were pretty excited to hang out again. His parents always treated me like I was their own son, so I was pretty stoked. He lived on a 20-acre ranch with 2 dogs and a cat. We were watching horror movies with all the lights off in his family's camper out on their driveway, while the family was inside. We went inside to get pizza, popcorn, and other junk food at around 12. My friend fell asleep pretty early, going to bed at 2 a.m. I was playing GTA when I heard the dogs barking very loudly. I brushed it off, thinking one of the ducks or chickens was messing with the dogs, or maybe even a deer or a coyote. Fast forward about 20 to 30 minutes, I needed to take a piss, so I went out, and I will never forget the face that looked back at me. The person ran off into the dark toward the entrance to the ranch. Sure, I was alarmed, but I still had to take a piss. I finished my business and went back inside, making sure to lock the camper door before returning to what I was doing. About another 20 to 30 minutes later, I heard the dogs barking again. This time, I woke up my friend and told him everything. He was skeptical at first, but then he looked out the blinds of the camper, and I will never forget the look on his face when he looked back at me. We called his parents, and his dad answered. He told him everything, but he thought we were trying to pull a prank. He laughed, saying, "Y'all boys aren't gonna get me." Nice try though. I started to confirm that we were being honest, and when he heard the panic in my voice he realized we were being serious. He quickly rushed out with his gun and threatened to shoot whoever was on their property. We heard all this from inside the camper, and we were terrified. We heard a blood-curdling scream, and then 3 gunshots went off. We went outside, and we saw a guy on the ground. My friend's mom called the cops while all this unfolded. They lived out in the country, so it took about 25 to 30 minutes for the cops to show up. Now the entire family was outside, terrified. The youngest of them all, whom we'll call Jacqueline, was crying. Not just because of the dead man about 20 feet ahead of her, but because the man had killed one of the dogs, maybe because it was very loud. Then the cops showed up, and it turns out the man was a prison escapee from just 15 miles away from my friend's house. We don't know why exactly the guy was there, but he was put behind bars for killing 2 people. Still to this day, we don't know if he was there to kill us. My best friend was sleeping over when we were about 11 or 12, and we were hanging out in my room. I was on my bed and she was on a mattress between my bed and the window. Out of absolutely nowhere, we hear a bang and my wall-length window totally shatters. Glass flies all around the place and we both got cut pretty bad. We both start losing our damn minds and run out of the room. Both of us were covered in blood and we cut our feet as we ran over the glass. My dad flies into action mode and locks us in the pantry, grabs a kitchen knife and runs into the backyard to look for anyone who may have been behind the window smashing. There was no one, so he calls the police and tends to our injuries. When the police arrive, they search my room for a cause and discover a huge solid ball bearing, presumably from a truck. It had landed less than 20 centimeters from where my friend's foot had been. If it had hit one of us, it could have killed us. There is no roads or anything near us, and my room faced into the back fence, so to this day we still have no clue where it came from or how it was traveling at such a speed. It cleared multiple fences and smashed a window, easily traveling at least half a mile to the nearest road, if that's where it came from. My mom had been out getting us McDonald's while this whole ordeal went on, so she was more than a little shocked when she arrived home. It still makes no sense to me how something like that could have been launched so far, at such an angle to hit my window. My dad thinks it fell off a plane, but what are the odds of it landing on us?